Welcome to Acclime Conversations, a thought leadership series where we discuss the most pressing matters for international investors in Vietnam that are shaping the business environment in the country. In today's discussion, I'm very happy to have Shiv joining us from KFC Vietnam, and we'll be speaking with him about the KFC story and the success that drives it into the Vietnamese market from a food service perspective, but as well understanding digital transformation, understanding supply chain challenges and the general business environment and how KFC is positioned to generate thought leadership and generate consumer value for the Vietnamese market. Shiv has been here for close to 7 years. He has around 20 years experience in the global markets, and he'll tell us more about that in a second, within the supply chain, within the fashion industry, product management, and digital transformation. And hopefully this discussion will give you an understanding, not just about the food service market in Vietnam, but as well on what digital transformation potential and other innovations that are used to attract and develop consumers into branding in Vietnam in this food service market, and how that would work for international investors and the ones that are present in currently in the Vietnamese market. So with that being said, welcome, Shiv, to our Acclime Conversations. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Very, very happy to be here as well. Look forward to having a good conversation.
Let's start first with a very kind of personal and casual introduction on yourself, on your story, what brought you here in Vietnam, and a bit of your background and how you ended up where you are now in this position.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I started my career in India. So, I'm Indian, as you might know, with a company called Bata. So, Bata is a very well renowned international footwear retailer, present in more than 60 countries. And my engagement with them was fairly long, like almost 16 years. And in this time, I worked with them in India and through various functions. Thereafter in Malaysia, where I took on some regional responsibilities for Asia and Africa. That gave me a really good exposure into all of these different business models, building strategic plans, branding, marketing, sourcing, and all of that. And then finally, I was entrusted to run the brand called Power globally. And that's when I was based in Canada and responsible for almost 40 countries where we had these Power branded operations. Finally, the organization gave me an opportunity to say that, hey, now you can go to Vietnam. Vietnam is a great upcoming country and you've got a great opportunity there. It's a little bit of a white space. So why not you go and build this wonderful opportunity? So I came to Vietnam as the country head and enjoyed my stint with them. COVID obviously changed a lot of things for many people. And in that sense, I also had to change my own personal plans. And that's when I had a calling, which is that I've always been really interested in technology. So I wanted to pursue a little bit on that side. With that, I started learning more on digital transformation and a bunch of other technologies, and at the same time pursuing consulting opportunities with different tech companies in the space of e-commerce, fintech, retail, and all of that. And that went off very well. And that's when this KFC opportunity came knocking about a year and a half back. So since then, I've been engaged with KFC, trying to grow the brand, the company, our number of units, managing people, and it's been a very, very wonderful experience, learning so much about a domain that I had not much knowledge of earlier, but something that's been really, really rewarding for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that. KFC has more than 200 shops already in Vietnam, more than 6,000 staff, and obviously I think the growth opportunities are much more than this in the next period. Before we go into the kind of the KFC story to understand a bit on the fundamentals of what drives the success there, it would be interesting to know, as you mentioned before, that you worked in Malaysia, you worked in India, worked in Canada. Obviously, your leadership style developed and molded with the culture where you were in. How do you feel in these 7 years that you've been in Vietnam that you developed your leadership strategy based on the culture and based on the context and the Vietnamese working style and Vietnamese economy, and what kind of strategies you implemented to be successful in that scenario.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, every country, the culture is somewhat different. And, recently we went through this experience of trying to map our culture, which is the leadership of KFC Vietnam versus that of the general Vietnam culture as it comes out from different surveys, as well as my own personal leadership style. And it was a really, really interesting experience. We learned a lot from that. Generally speaking, most companies would have a particular cultural code which is relevant for that company globally, right? And so does KFC, which is a part of the Yum Brands group. Uh, and so that cultural code, in some ways, um, drives the kind of people that we recruit. So within our interviewing process itself, there is ways of trying to understand cultural nuances of individuals that we are recruiting. So that helps us to align some of that. The second other few things specific to Vietnam that I can think of are in Vietnam, how group dynamics and harmony of the whole group, as well as hierarchy, are very, very important factors. As let's say, opposed to some other countries where it might be more of autonomy and more individualistic, innovation-driven, aspiration-driven approach. So what we try and do here is bring these kind of thoughts and changes in the way that we operate sometimes. For example, we would sometimes want to have more input and more group-based development of certain issues. A good example is that we had different groups in different parts of our company, and we brainstormed as to what kind of new product we want to bring in, and that kind of gave birth to one of our most successful burgers, which is a shrimp burger, which is specific to Vietnam. And this is an example of how decision making by having more inputs from larger groups helps. About hierarchy, we respect that. A lot of Vietnamese look at that as a really important driver. And so we've tailored our mentorship programs in a way that, senior members are able to support and help younger members learn about different aspects of the business. This fosters good exchange of information, and we have programs like Coffee with Leaders, which helps, facilitate such exchanges. So that helps as well. Even in terms of how the Vietnamese workforce in general is ready to adapt to change, right? So that element as well has to be kind of built into the way that one runs a company, and therefore bringing people in early on in the decision making process, giving them more information and time to kind of relate to and understand the reasons for a certain decision. These are all important aspects to running a company in an efficient manner and in a manner which really helps all the employees unite and focus and go towards a single goal. So these are some of the lessons of leadership which probably I could share with you that I have learned over the years.
Very interesting, and I definitely agree with quite a lot of what you said, specifically on the hierarchy side, and getting your Vietnamese stuff out of that concept and opening up a more horizontal approach into developing ideas and innovation proved as a success.
Right.
As well, with our experience when we discuss with foreign investors, majority of the stakeholders that we deal with are international investors. we see more often than not that those companies that have that international pitch inside their structure, their operations, their drive, are able to generate higher profitability, higher retention, because you have that synergy of cross-cultural bond between that Vietnamese context and international context that raises the bar. And that's definitely something important within the Vietnamese context and the growth of the domestic economy. What I would ask on the leadership, what would be more personal to you, kind of your own leadership style, your leadership mantra? What are your values that you think drive and have an influence within the KYC structure, personally, from what you've learned and what you think that represents you as an individual, but as well your goals with your organization?
Yeah,
Maybe you can share one or two of these. Obviously,
right.
it's your style that you developed throughout the years, but I'm just curious. Maybe you can give an example or two of how you take on that leadership approach with your team.
Right. Um, I'm one of the few things that I learned early on in my journey in trying to be a leader is that one must be able to communicate the goals of a company in a way that makes sense, is understandable, practical, and acceptable by the larger community of employees within the organization. So, communication is key, and this goal can only be derived from having a fairly clear understanding of the company. So deriving that understanding and then bringing that clarity is one of the key things that I believe in. The other one is to really build relationships of trust.
Mhm.
I mean, with and without trust, things can either very difficult things can sometimes very easily be done, and at other times it can be infinitesimal. It can be really, really difficult to achieve as well, right?
Mhm.
So I think fostering trust is another option in terms of um, being collaborative or directive. Sometimes the situation demands a slightly more directive approach, and I could easily adapt between the two. But generally, I'm more collaborative, and I believe in the power of iterations, so that every aspect that we are working on, as we try to make a better version of it, make the whole processes better, we try to get to a place where we create a competitive difference.
Mm.
So I think hopefully those are some of the elements of my leadership style which I believe make a difference and actually do so.
Right. Thank you for sharing. And you spoke about the goals of KFC Vietnam and understanding those and communicating those. Speaking about KFC Vietnam, can you share a few details on what's the market position, what's the current status from a development and awareness perspective in Vietnam? KFC was been here for 27 years in the market, one of the first fast food chain that entered the Vietnamese market. Obviously has grown quite a lot. And what are some of the objectives that you have to further develop the organization and the
Mhm.
footprint?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, 1997 is when we started with a single store in Ho Chi Minh City, and we have more than 200 stores right now. We have a very well entrenched and leadership position in the tier one cities, which is Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, and a few others. And we have recently started to grow our network of units uh, quite aggressively. We grew about 32 units last year, and we have a pretty aggressive plan. And we are doing that even this year, despite an overall slowdown in the growth of units in the whole market as a whole. And we're doing that by approaching tier two, tier three, and tier four cities. Vietnam simultaneously is having a few different trends. Like there's a very young population here. Like 70% of the population is under 35, and the middle class is growing. So we see that as an opportunity to look at the growing middle class and giving them access to great taste and food and consumer customer experience that KFC units, KFC restaurants can provide.
Mhm.
So that's the growth and expansion on one side. On the other, on the menu side, we've successfully implemented much of the global leading menu items that KFC has worldwide. So whether it's our fried chicken, which is the original chicken, or the hot and spicy chicken, our formats such as tenders or nuggets, we have them all, which is a part of our core menu. But we've also gone ahead and tried to create some products which are even more closer to the Vietnamese palate. So it's a little bit of a fusion, bringing the best of what we have globally in KFC with tastes that are relevant here. So it's one of our newest launch is the burger banh mi, which is a burger, but we've used pickled vegetables and sauces that makes it really amazing for the Vietnamese consumer, and it's been really well received.
No surprise there.
And then there is so many others like a shrimp burger, like I mentioned earlier, or even our innovations such as the egg tart. The egg tart is actually a really, really close to many people's heart, many Vietnamese consumers' hearts. So we've done that well, and we continue to do that even more. The other thing is about our being a first mover in adopting digital technologies. So way back, KFC was actually the first company to start home delivery here in Vietnam as a food service, and then that continues. We try to drive digital technologies that help us bring more access to the consumers, and yeah, so we continue that as well. And then we try and give back to the community, whether it be in the way that we try and responsibly manage food sizes and portions, or we recycle our the oil to and convert it to biodiesel, or we have initiatives such as reforestation, where we go and try and plant trees within the capacity and the ability that we have. So all of these initiatives are even giving back to the community, right? So with all of these things, we are moving ahead in a very strong path of growth and improvement in all aspects, and we tend to be pretty loved by the consumers here in Vietnam.
Yeah. And because of all the things that you mentioned, probably as well the culture, but as well being part of the community actively. On a study that you shared with me in 2023, KFC was designated as the most loved brand in Vietnam. I'm sure it's going to be there was significant competition. Highlands Coffee, Trung Nguyen Coffee were second and third places. Why do you think KFC was able to kind of take on that lead role in Vietnam in the context that it is an international organization, but it became, from a Vietnamese perspective, um, more culturally aligned than even the local brands,
Right.
right? Trung Nguyen, one of the core foundational brands of the Vietnamese, and as well Highlands Coffee.
Right, right. I think that there are a few factors why this has come to be, right? Like one of the things is the is moving early. So we've been around for 26, 27 years. That's a pretty significant time for the brand to be kind of make its place within the culture and the fabric of the Vietnamese society, right? So that's one aspect. Then there is this aspect of uh, consistency in quality and taste, right? And none of these, I mean, one can't go without the other one. So taste is super important because it's that craving that brings people back uh, to our restaurants. So many of my friends, when they came to know that I would be working for KFC, said that, hey, you know what? It's really my comfort food. It's something that I really love to enjoy, and so I can see and sense that over the years it's become a part of them. They trust and they believe in the brand, and they are sure that if they turn up in the restaurant, they're going to likely have a amazing finger licking tasty food, right? So that's the other part. Then there is this little bit of customization that we've done. Whether like I mentioned about some of these items. In addition to that, there are more customizations. Say, for example, meals that we have with rice, right? That's not something that's customized, keeping in mind the Vietnamese habit of consumption, and lately also other dishes like the pasta, as an example. And interestingly, the Vietnamese palate is always evolving with the as the culture changes with the advent of different trends, and we try to keep up with it. For example, we introduced one of our best dishes, the nan bun chicken rice, inspired from Japan, and it was so well adopted. Right, so keeping us ourselves culturally relevant from a food perspective. Right, so that's important. And then there's two other aspects of being able to be accessible digitally as well as giving back to the community. I think this is all of this has gone into creating a sort of a love that the consumers have for our brand, and so we are extremely grateful for that, and we are extremely happy as well that for 3 years in a row that we've been um, so through the surveys we know that we are on the top of the table. But of course, numbers don't matter as much as the love that people have for the brand, and so that we are really committed to making sure that we continue to deserve that love. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You mentioned quite a few times the digital component of KFC, part of the brand, and also the value proposition. From a broader perspective, if you look at digital transformation and your experience, and you look at markets, India, Malaysia, and where they are within this kind of development within their digital economy, how do you see Vietnam's value proposition as a whole, as a digital economy, and what are some of the opportunities that you see evolving here?
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, that's a big question. So, for
We,
one,
we actually released a report just 2 weeks ago on the Vietnam's digital economy, and uh, there's a lot to talk about indeed. And I'm curious to hear some of
no,
your
I mean, your
insights.
report was very much on point, right? There's so many important vectors which are aligning. For one, it's the government. The government's doing a fair bit. I saw the launch of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Center. That's a big one, right? And then there are pretty clear targets of 5G rollouts, there's discussions with big companies such as Nvidia to try and get more AI incorporating more AI. There are technology parks. There are different kinds of tax SOPs which are rolled out to some companies who can come and invest here. So investments are pouring in. So there's a fair bit of buoyancy on that side, insofar as the government and the infrastructure and the laws are concerned, so which is great. Um, in terms of the startup ecosystem, we've seen that mature as well a little bit. So there was a time when there was a lot of investments coming in all stages, which is like the early stage, the growth stage, and all of that. We see that there's been a more nuanced stand for investors to look at startups which have a more sustainable business model, or potentially have a clear path towards profitability. So that's great as well, because then we try to move out from the cycle of indiscriminate investing, and then a lot of failures, right? So that's great from a startup perspective. When we look at fintech, right? And in fintech, we see that um, there are some foundational technologies, like for example, Viet QR, like payments. They've really taken off, right? Like
That really transformed in the last, what, less than 1 year, I think
it's
1.5.
incredible.
It really transformed the entire economic environment in Vietnam.
The pace is incredible. I mean, I for one, I now go places and I don't carry my wallet. It's my phone, and I know that I can pay anywhere using a QR code. So which is great. So and also from an e-commerce perspective, if you look at it, I mean, e-commerce is growing in Southeast Asia, but what we see is that it's more like a overall Southeast Asia is more like a higher single digit growth. But Vietnam's growth is higher than 20%, like close to 30% actually. So Vietnam is largely powering the growth of Southeast Asia's e-commerce industry, which is great. It talks about how important that is, but also it's somewhat related to the maturity of e-commerce in Vietnam, right? So yeah, I mean these are all great things, and then there are the path forward is also somewhat visible, like fintech as an example is taken off with consumer payments quite a bit in the B2C space. The B2B space is somewhat is where some more improvement can happen, right? So that's kind of lagging the B2C space in some ways. But we do see a lot of effort, a lot of action from the government as well. And with the digitalization of payments in the B2B space, there is a lot of opportunity for different services like financial services as well to be more entrenched. I mean, they're there in some aspects. If you look at the big corporates, of course, they've got all access to all kinds of financial services. You look at the SMEs, a certain percentage has access to it. It's not saturated, and then for MSMEs, it's further less, right? So the SME and the MSME space that's coming, and it only comes when there is data, which can be used to, let's say, underwrite a risk for a product or of that nature. So that's coming. That's a challenge, but that's also an opportunity because that could be a game changer
That's
itself,
right.
right?
And there's already quite a few startups that are addressing these challenges and problems for SMEs with the various types of financial products, risk management, implementing as well big data or AI models into streamlining and offering those financial services in a much more digital way than the traditional bank system. And we see as well that majority of the banks, they are very open to partner with fintechs and be part of the ecosystem to drive growth.
Right, right. So that all that's happening in the e-commerce sector, we can see that the growth is still there, and new formats are coming up, and we also see that there's a certain level of consolidation. So some uh, players are actually exiting the market because it's really competitive. So it's a process of a general natural process of maturing.
Yeah,
And
that shows the maturity level,
yeah,
which Vietnam was in transition for
right.
pre and during COVID, and now it becomes more consolidated in that perspective.
Absolutely. So there you've got a really bright future ahead, lots of opportunities as well.
Digital economy in Vietnam indeed is quite a hot topic, and yeah, happy to discuss on other occasions on this matter for sure. And when we speak about all these growth pillars within the broad economy, in the end, it all comes down to the customers, the consumers. What are they thinking? How are they accessing products and services? And what's best for them? And what are their needs and changes? What did you discover in the last years or so about interesting changing needs or changing habits within consumers? And maybe a few examples of how are these addressed and are relevant within your KFC kind of marketing
Sure.
and consumer understanding strategy.
Yeah. I mean, consumers are changing all the time, but COVID was, of course, a very landmark event, right? So before that, it was all buoyancy and it was all things were all going up. And then COVID happened. And then for a change, consumers kind of came to understand that this is also a possibility, right? Like they have to prepare themselves for. So immediately post COVID, there was everything went back sharply back, right? But very much in the minds of the consumers, they realize that there is a need to save. So in general, it appears that consumers have tightened their purse strings a fair bit, and in the last since post TET of 2023, pretty much since then, it's been a tough time for domestic companies who are selling in domestically. So the growth of retail goods and services. If you actually minus the inflation and you look at the real number, you can understand that it's not going to be easy for a lot of companies selling domestically. So consumers in general are extremely value conscious. They want to be spending their money very carefully, budgeting for much of what they want to do, and they clearly have their sort of areas where they want to spend. Um, Unfortunately for us, the industry that we are in, consumers are planning more carefully about those occasions when they go out of home to actually eat out, and that's one of the things that they're trying to kind of be more careful about. So yeah, I mean, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that they're also much more aware of what's available, right? So they look at reviews, they're looking at carefully looking at promotional offers, waiting for them sometimes. So just that the way that they consume is kind of evolving, right? So that's the other really important key trend. Yeah, I mean, so with all of these things being in place, as a brand that's been around for a fairly long time, we realize that sticking to the core is really, really important. So we continue to work tirelessly on our taste. We want to live up to the promise of taste, so that every consumer that comes to our store, they feel that craving and they feel that satisfaction. Consumers are expecting much more in terms of experience. So they're much more demanding on that aspect. So it's worthwhile to look at how uh, in in restaurant or in store experience can be elevated, so that there is also a reason for them uh, to the restaurants, because it's so much more easier for them to just sit at home and just with the press of a button have something delivered to them, right? So consumer experience is super important as well. So from our perspective, not just from the food aspect of it, that's something that we are super focused on, always trying to drive. We are trying to drive innovative consumer experiences. Recently, we did interesting campaign where we invited our consumers to scan our packaging, and with augmented reality, they could connect back to memories of how they used to play different games when they were younger.
Mhm.
And with that and some more gamification, they could unlock great offers, right? So these kind of experiences, which are innovative and different, are what consumers expect,
Mhm.
have come to expect now. Uh, Keeping in mind, of course, that the the base, or something which is just undeniable, is that the taste, the quality, and all of the customer service, that has to be there, right? With that, they now want added experiences like this. So yeah, that's how we are coping with, and I think we're doing pretty well so far. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's always a model where innovation really comes to add on a specific component on a very strong foundation, underlying foundation of a value of the substance of the company. It could be culturally, it could be digitally, it could be physically in the store. We've seen as well, when we did our study with the digital economy in Vietnam, that um, for the majority of consumers, sustainability and that digital value add for the majority of the brands and where they're accessing them really push them in the area of becoming more aligned to that specific brand. And I think KFC as well, from what I've seen online, is going towards that direction into the digitalization of the branding experience of the in shop, and as well delivery and online experience, TikTok e-commerce and TikTok kind of social experience generating online.
Right, right. Absolutely. I mean, our digital initiatives have been in the forefront of all of our planning. So As an example, digitization of order intake is a very, very key thing, not just for e-commerce, but also in store. So, for example, the traditional way of consumers ordering is for them to look at a menu board and then call out what they need to the cashier. But a much more intuitive as well as relaxing option is for them to access a self-ordering kiosk and be able to see the menu in its totality, mix and match options, and create the most customized and the most desirable combination for them. So they're not pressured into making a decision right away. Numerous times you've seen this. In some of the movies as to how people are stressed when they're in a queue and there's people waiting and then they have to make quick decisions.
And then they're all doing like this.
And they have to look at it. So it's not as convenient. So we have a very ambitious and aggressive rollout of self-ordering kiosks. Right now, we've almost covered 70% of our entire system with self-ordering kiosks, and we are pretty much the first brand to do it in the scale that's been done. So that's one. In addition to this, you mentioned about TikTok. Essentially, TikTok and us being on TikTok is a part of our larger strategy of being present in many more sales channels, right? Like today, when people love scrolling, right? So they discover products, they discover information in a completely different manner. And so TikTok has been the point of contention and discussion in so many different places, and from anywhere from the presidential debates to everywhere else. And the one clear thing is that it's just a trend that can't be ignored, and therefore uh, in partnership and working with TikTok Vietnam, we were able to be the first brand to launch ourselves with live streaming, but more than live streaming, pairing it up with a TikTok shop presence as well. And therefore, it's a fairly new initiative. Like we are only 3 months, 4 months into this initiative. Of course, the effort started much earlier, but within these 3 to 4 months, we do see that there is a dramatic step up in our ability to connect with younger consumers, especially the 18 to 24-year-olds, as well as it rubs off on the brand as well, driving much more modernity. And then there is also the commercial side of it, which is sales. So yeah, I mean, expanding to more channels, whether it is social commerce, whether it is third party apps like it could be fintech apps, it could be banking apps, it could be loyalty apps, your box got it, and the likes. So being accessible everywhere is key, and in order to orchestrate all of those orders coming into the right restaurants and then delivering on them, there is a very substantial digital tech stack that one must put in place in order to not go not be disrupted by that.
I remember when you mentioned social commerce. When we did our e-commerce industry report 2 years ago, we were working on understanding what are the trends that will shape the next 5 years into the Vietnamese e-commerce landscape. And social commerce was one of those trends to look for. Now, essentially, social commerce, which is TikTok Shop or variations of those, are the number one e-commerce platforms in the entire country, larger than the Lazadas and the Shopees and others. And that is a significant change in a time span of 2.5 years or so. And that's why it kind of this discussion kind of drives me into my last question as a wrap up. What do you see the next 2.5 years from a trend, from a innovation and potentially significant change perspective within your industry, within the fast food service, and maybe the digital component attached to it as well? Because as you see in Asia, 2 to 3 years, the change can be significant, but specifically in Vietnam, that is leapfrogging so much in so many areas and market verticals. In less than 1 year, these things would be very different. For example, AI, right? And the Vietnamese consumers are very quite focused and align with a lot of the AI pitch of the value pitch that exists here. So that's kind of as a wrap up question for this conversation. What are your views in a, let's say, short term into what's next for your industry?
Yeah. Yeah, interestingly, I mean, I just read a survey a few days back, and the survey tried to understand the perception of different countries in Southeast Asia towards AI. And interestingly, Vietnamese are absolutely not daunted at all. They are really, really open towards AI, and they're ranking the highest in that survey. So yeah, I mean, Vietnamese adoption of AI is going to be strong. But going back to your question on what trends do we see? Well, it's about digitization of much of the process. So there are consumer facing technologies. Say, for example, like kiosk is one. There could be QR. There could be other consumer facing technologies. And so these consumer facing technologies will try and make it easier and seamless for people to access the products from anywhere, right? Whether it's be in the store or sitting in their couches, wherever it is. So that's definitely going to happen. The second is with the digitization of such processes, we have access to a lot of data, and there are two concurrent sort of forces. One of them is for companies to try and use the data, mine it, and try and provide personalized services in the best possible manner. On the other side, there are regulations that we've got to adhere to in terms of managing customer data, privacy, and all of that. So I do see both these trends playing out really, really strongly going forward. But companies need to be really focused on this path of first party consumer data, and essentially focused on how more consumers can be acquired and retained and engaged with, right? So yeah, so these are some of the consumer facing trends, and then AI is a bit of a game changer. Not a bit of a game changer. It's really an understatement. It's a huge game changer, even from a back office perspective, whether it be planning inventory or planning how much food should we prepare in our restaurants ready for consumers to come and enjoy. There are so many applications of AI. It's just incredible. So companies that are able to adopt these in an effective manner that actually creates real benefits are going to be the winners. So I do see that a big play and a big reason for wins are for those companies that can lead in these areas, keeping, as you mentioned correctly, the foundations solid, right?
Mm.
No one wants to buy a product from a great app, but if the product is not good, it's not doesn't make sense. So
Right,
keeping
right.
all of that going.
Chip, thank you so much for participating in a Acclime conversation. I had a wonderful time to understand more about not just KFC but yourself as a business leader and what drives you in the Vietnamese market into creating value, but as well kind of trying to give insights as well to our viewers into what's next and how kind of the digital space and the digital economy is really influencing all the sectors that are active in Vietnam, including foods, retail, fashion, and everything in between. So thank you again for joining.
Thank you, Brad. It's been a pleasure. I've loved talking to you. Thank you again. Thank you, Brad.
And for the viewers, thank you so much for your attention. And I look forward to seeing you again at our next Climb Conversations episode.